Hey there everyone, welcome back. A episode of Historical Progression in Kerbal Space Program this time. And what I'm building here, it's quite weird how this is tied in, but I'm building the first of the Apollo missions. Last week we had the Orion capsule make its first launch. It was amazing. It was 2 orbits and then it came back. And now I think by the time you'll be watching this, it will already have been arrived in Florida again for disassembly and rechecking to relaunch it in 2018 because it's got no money. But yeah, there you go. So what I'm doing is the precursor missions for the moonshot that I'm going to do in my historical progression series, and I'm trying to work out how to make a boilerplate version of the Saturn 1B rocket, which is what they did. They didn't just send someone straight to the moon. The Apollo program didn't start with Apollo 8. It started off with a lot of little launches using slightly underpowered rockets that had the same weight or aerodynamic profile as the actual Apollo missions. That's what I'm doing here. I've used entirely structural parts to make a service module that is going to be the first Saturn 1B test flight. And the Saturn 1B rocket, you'll see a picture of it in a minute, is a very unique looking piece. It's got a very, very strange arrangement of tanks. It was comprised mainly of 8 cylindrical tanks around the body rather than having a large central stack. Two on top of each other within a single stack, like most rockets are. This had them all in a strange kind of octuplet around the side of the body, which I'm going to try and emulate by using solid rocket boosters. It's not the same because they were liquid fuel engines, but it's as close as I can approximate, really, to what it looked like. No. Okay, so trying to find the right solid rocket booster to finish the look, and I go with the ones from the KW Rocketry pack in the end. No decouplers because they're part of the fuselage. Oh yeah, and also each individual one had a fin for stability. So there we go. Just strutting the hell out of this because I've just realised that these are basically just decouplers that I'm using for the main body of that. But yeah, you can see the arrangement here. They had these cylindrical bases for the first stage that all fed into their own nozzle at the bottom. It was a very strange design, and nobody's really done that since. Since basically this was invented, they decided to go with single tube stacks, which I guess there's probably a reason for that based on efficiency or safety. But yeah, this is what it looks like in real life. This is a boilerplate version of the Saturn S1B, and that's what I'm going to be launching. But first, to make sure all of these moon missions are working, I'm going to have to launch up a few satellites, because I'm playing this with remote tech, so I've sped this up quite a bit. What's this rocket? I mean, it looks mostly like one of the modern Arianespace, what are they called? Number 5 or number 6? Oh, taking a spin, and trying to recover. Lost a lot of fuel, obviously. Okay, yeah, it's like the Arianespace rockets that they launched for the ESA. But I guess it was just to put the satellite up there because this is a useful part of the logistics that I'm going to have to use for my moon mission. Because I don't actually have anything in orbit capable of sending signals to and from the moon in remote tech. So that's what I'm doing here. It's a really quite chunky satellite because I wanted to not bring too much debris into orbit. And I'm going for not like geocentric, but really high, essentially. So decoupling this now, got retro rockets to bring the main orbital maneuvering engine back into the atmosphere. This tiny little monopropellant engine is what we've actually got on the satellite. These are parts from the Tantares mod, I think. I believe so. mixed with KW Rocketry for structural components. And what's this going to do? All it's going to do is basically provide a relay between any robotic missions we're sending and the Kerbal Space Center, because for the first few missions, these are going to be unpiloted test craft for the KERBLO program. And there you go. It's not exactly where I wanted it to be because it's got no connection. So what I'm doing is I'm doing a slightly out of kilter orbit, and then I'm going to boost it to orbital. Geosynchronous, geostationary. But for that, you need to make sure it's above the Space Center, otherwise you'll need to make a whole constellation. And this isn't to provide complete 24-hour coverage, or not 24-hour, 6-hour coverage based on a Kerbal day, but it's to just provide a little bit of a boost in communications, because the Kerbal Space Center tracking station doesn't provide the kind of connection you would need, and this would also provide an extra bit of angle for anything out towards the moon, because it's all done by line of sight. And of course, if it does go further, like we have missions to Mars or whatever, then, you know, fair enough. But back to the main mission. Here we have my Saturn 1B, and it is ready to launch. Get rid of the fuel tower. Liquid fuel engines are fired. Clamps away, and engaging the solid rocket engines. Okay. Now the Saturn 1B was developed for the Apollo program, but it went on to do loads of stuff. It was used to take people into orbit for the Skylab missions. Also, it launched components for Skylab, but it did launch the actual people to Skylab because it was the only real launcher that they had. Because Saturn V would have been complete overkill for the distance that needed to go to low Earth orbit. The Saturn V could get you to the moon, so they didn't need that at all. And the test missions that they did basically were to test out the escape tower, the aerodynamic properties of the service module, and the upper stages of this were used in the Saturn V itself. They were directly ported over. The strange, like spider-engined first stage wasn't really used for anything else. And after that, they decided to just go to a single, stupidly large engine at the bottom. But yeah, this basically launched all of the test vehicles, including the lunar modules. The Apollo Soyuz test project was launched on a 1B. Incredibly useful, and as well it was basically used to see if you could make engines that big, because launching a Saturn V was incredibly expensive. This was expensive, but not as expensive, and that's why it was developed. And as well, it also provided restartable liquid fuel engines, which was incredibly useful for translunar injections, where when you get into orbit, you shut your engine off, and then you need to restart it when you're in the right position, and that's what the upper stage of the S1B was used for. Now my S1B is just one stage because it's all it needs to be for Kerbal Space Program. It's not an identical copy. And we're just about ready now to think about decoupling my crew service module. And that's the view looking back over the fuselage. And the engines are cutting out now. So now let's detach the boilerplate. I thought about trying to get rid of the escape tower, but it's not necessary for this mission. And in fact, they hadn't tested the escape tower at this point. They just used a steel structure that looked the same shape as the escape tower, and put that on the top of it just to approximate the aerodynamics. And there we go. That's our crew service module away. Now, as you'll notice, it's just a fairing adapter. There's nothing there. It's completely empty, and that's because the first one was an aerodynamic test with a fully weighted boilerplate crew service re-entry vehicle at the top, but it didn't test the actual re-entry. This one was designed to just go and crash, basically. They were checking the performance as it moved through the air on the way up. They weren't interested in anything else after that point. One cool fact is that this actually was built by Chrysler. They were contracted to do rocket launches, and the strange spider design was a Chrysler invention, who obviously now make cars. Now I do have deadly re-entry on this, so this should provide some nice fireworks as it comes into the night side. And yeah, it's burning up. That's the escape tower gone. Oh, that's it all gone. And it burns up. Now the Saturn S1B wasn't the only test vehicle that they used. This is a picture of the Little Joe rocket that was used in the Mercury program. As you can see, there's a person in the front for scale. It was a tiny rocket, and it launched the Monkey astronauts, but this is the one that they used for the Apollo program. This is the Little Joe 2. And it's a scaled up version, basically. It's got a few stages, but it was built to be the same weight, the same diameter as the fuselage for the crew capsule for the Apollo missions. And they used these to test the escape towers, to test aerodynamic properties, and also to test the re-entry of the crew capsules. This is me setting up my Little Joe 2 on the launch pad. And already I've noticed that it's really quite underpowered. I wanted to do a high altitude test for the crew capsule, but I doubt that this is going to get high enough to do anything. So I'm going to say that a redesign is necessary for this one. Yeah, so this was the smallest of the booster stages that was used for any of the Apollo programs. And it was launched exclusively from the White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico. They didn't need to go to Cape Canaveral because the altitude you didn't have to worry about a big Saturn V stage falling down in the middle of a crowded area. This didn't go that high. And as you can see, mine definitely didn't go that high. It's already coming down now. And this isn't good. Okay. And that's gone. Okay, let's try that again with a slightly bigger version now. I've used a bigger KW Rocketry engine. I've used more stages. And there we go. This should go quite high. I'm actually throttling back quite a lot here because I don't need all of the thrust that this can give me, and it would just burn up anyway. So yeah, this is basically just carrying an aluminium shell in the same shape as the Apollo command module. With an escape tower, and it was just to test that the booster, the Little Joe booster itself would work, and then to test in stages that the boilerplate would work, the aerodynamics would work, and it would also provide a test of the launch escape system. In fact, they tested a launch pad escape. They just put an empty Little Joe booster on the launch pad with an escape system, and that was it used. It was just used for an escape there on the pad, not in a high altitude or anything like that, but that's classed as a launch of the Little Joe missile. And as you can see, I'm having another little problem in my Little Joe with it rotating like that. It's because I've got the near aerodynamics model on, and it's not as unforgiving as far, but it's definitely not stock where you can just point it and go. And there we go, that's the test of the launch escape system. Seemed to work, although I think the little Kerbals inside would be tossing their vomit all around the capsule. But there we go, it stopped spinning now, and this does have a heat plate at the bottom to allow for a re-entry, so that's another thing we'll be testing here. And with the pretty effects from deadly re-entry, that should be something to watch. So yeah, it worked in high altitude, the escape system, so they tested them that it would just work on the pad, which meant the complete destruction of the Little Joe inside, but it was incredibly useful because you needed to know that the escape tower would work and provide enough thrust at the ground as well, because it needed to get high enough for the parachutes to open. This boilerplate does not have parachutes. The ones in real life did, I believe. Some of them. I don't think all of them did. Mine is just going to be tracked for telemetry, and then it's going to come back and explode. So that's pretty much it for this episode. Next episode, we're going to be looking at the Pegasus mission, which was an important step in Apollo. And after that, we're going to be moving on to the crewed missions, starting off with a look at Apollo. Well, we're going to have a look at Apollo 1, talk a little bit about the history of what happened to those pilots. And then we're going to go through Apollo 8, the testing the lunar lander. And after that will come KERBLO 11, where we're going to try and put a Kerbal on the moon. Thanks for watching, everyone. Remember, if you like this video, you can show your support by liking, subscribing, or commenting on the video itself on YouTube. Or you can head over to Patreon and you can check out my channel where you can help from as little as $1 US. 1 oozed can really change my life, change the channel. Head over, check out the rewards, see if it's something you'd be interested in. If not, just leave a comment. I'm happy to read everything and they really make a big difference to me and my channel. Thanks, guys. See you for the next video.